chosen one. The moment the real truth surfaced, everything shifted, not in public, not with noise or confrontation. Internally, a quiet collapse began where no one could see it. Now they're drowning in guilt, not because they finally understand your pain, but because no one ever asked for your side. That's what terrifies them. You were never the problem. You were the evidence. They didn't silence you to protect you. They silenced you to protect the illusion they built their entire identity on. An illusion of being kind, of being patient, of being the victim who tried so hard. Every time you tried to speak, remember what happened. Your words were cut off before they could land. Your meaning was twisted into something you never said. Your emotions were used as proof that you were unstable. That wasn't confusion. That wasn't misunderstanding. That was control, because the second your truth touched air, their entire construction would collapse. They knew it. They had already built a version of reality where they were the hero and you were the problem, where your pain became evidence of their virtue, where your silence became proof of their righteousness. And here's the part they never calculated. Your silence didn't protect them, it exposed them, because silence creates space, and space creates questions. People started noticing the imbalance, only one voice telling the story, only one version repeated. Too polished, too rehearsed, too defensive. Why does this person talk so much about someone who doesn't matter anymore? Why does curiosity feel dangerous? Why does your name still change the energy in the room? They mistook your silence for defeat. But silence was never weakness. Silence was incubation. While they were busy maintaining their image, you were understanding the pattern, seeing the manipulation clearly, separating memory from distortion, pain from truth. And once clarity arrives, power follows. Here's what really unsettles them. Nobody ever asked you, which means your story still exists in possibility. In the unknown, in the space they cannot control, they don't know what you remember, what you noticed, what you kept, what you understand now. And uncertainty is torture to someone living inside a lie. They built a system where your side became socially forbidden. Not banned, just uncomfortable. Questions felt disloyal. Curiosity felt like betrayal. Sympathy for you felt like treason. That's how narrative prisons are built. And prisons like that only survive while pressure is maintained. The moment someone relaxes, the moment someone wonders, the moment someone finally asks, everything destabilizes because your absence created a contradiction. If they were truly innocent, why the need for control? If their version was complete, why the fear of inquiry? You were cast as the villain not because you were wrong, but because they needed a villain to survive their own reflection. They couldn't face what they did. So they rewrote who you were. Emotional, difficult, unstable, too much. Those weren't descriptions. They were defenses. Insurance policies against the future, designed so that if you ever spoke, your credibility would already be damaged, which reveals the truth they'll never admit. They planned for this, and their guilt now has nothing to do with compassion. They're not haunted by your pain, they're haunted by exposure. Watch them, the over-explaining, the rehearsed justifications, the tension when your name surfaces, the strange need to keep telling the story long after it's supposedly over. That's not healing, that's maintenance. And maintenance is exhausting because lies leak in posture, in tone, in defensiveness, in the sudden urge to correct narratives nobody challenged. They resent you now, not because you hurt them, but because you exist as living proof of who they became. In their mind, if you had disappeared completely, they could finally forget. So they blame you for their guilt. This is what happens when someone chooses image over integrity. Guilt doesn't inspire growth. It inspires hostility toward the mirror. And you were always the mirror. They never wanted you healed. They wanted you grateful. As long as you were broken, they were elevated. As long as you needed them, they mattered. The moment you reclaimed yourself, the hierarchy collapsed. Your healing exposed that they were never saving you. They were feeding on you. Public compassion, private control, When you left to protect your peace, they turned your boundary into betrayal, your absence into evidence, your silence into a weapon. But that weapon backfired, because incomplete stories rot. Your untold side became a presence, a shadow in every retelling, a tension they couldn't erase, a contradiction people slowly began to feel. And here's the truth they can't escape. When you finally speak, you won't sound angry, you won't sound unstable, you won't sound dramatic, you'll sound clear. What? And clarity destroys performances. They didn't destroy you because you were too much. They destroyed you because you were too real. Your honesty threatened their mask. Your depth threatened their shallowness. Your questions threatened their concealment, so they attacked first. Preemptive erasure, because people only try to erase what can expose them. You weren't a punishment, you were the test, and they failed it. They lived in shallow waters, you arrived with oceans. They didn't drown because you were deep. They drowned because they never learned to swim in truth. Your story didn't die, it went underground, and underground stories don't decay. They root, they grow, they build pressure, because truth never disappears. It waits, and what terrifies them most isn't your voice, it's timing. Because one day, quietly, casually, unexpectedly, someone will finally ask, what really happened? And when that question enters the room, their entire architecture collapses, not because you planned it, because truth has gravity. You didn't disappear, you outlasted. The story was always yours. They were just actors who forgot they weren't the author. Your absence created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, people began wondering, why is there only one version of this story? Why does this person sound so rehearsed, so defensive, so eager to explain before anyone even asks? Why does curiosity suddenly feel dangerous, as if asking the simplest question might cost someone their place, their safety, their belonging? Because silence has a strange effect. It doesn't erase truth. It amplifies suspicion. They mistook your silence for surrender, for acceptance, for defeat. But silence was never submission. Silence was positioning. Silence was observation. Silence was the moment you stopped reacting and started seeing. While they were celebrating what they thought was victory, you were tracing patterns, not just in what they said, but in how they said it, in what they avoided, in who was allowed to speak and who was quietly discouraged from asking. You were learning the architecture of the game. And once you understand the game, you can never be played again. Here's the part that changes everything. Nobody ever asked your side, not by accident, by design. They didn't need to forbid questions. They simply made questions feel dangerous. Curiosity became disloyalty. Empathy became betrayal. Neutrality became suspicious. People learned quickly that asking about you came with consequences. A raised eyebrow, a sudden chill, a subtle warning disguised as concern. They didn't silence dissent. They priced it. They made speaking costly. Social discomfort, loss of access, risk of being recast as the next problem. And most people, without even realizing it, chose safety over truth. That's how invisible fences are built. No signs, no locks, no rules, just pressure. And pressure shapes behavior better than any command ever could. Oh, so your story didn't vanish. It was quarantined, placed in a space no one felt permitted to enter. But here's what they didn't understand. Systems like that are fragile. They only survive while fear is actively maintained. The moment vigilance weakens, the moment someone feels secure enough to wonder, the moment a single person risks curiosity, the structure starts to shake. Because forbidden questions carry weight, and unanswered questions ferment. People begin to notice contradictions, the tone that doesn't match the content, the emotion that doesn't match the facts, the defensiveness where there should be calm. Why does this story need so much protection? Why does this person need to manage perception so carefully? Why does the narrative collapse the moment it's examined? Your silence didn't protect them. It exposed the seams, because stories that are true don't fear inquiry. Only performances do. And while they were busy guarding the surface, something far more dangerous was happening beneath it. You were healing. You were separating memory from manipulation, truth from distortion, emotion from interpretation. You were building clarity, and clarity is lethal to control. Now your silence is no longer empty. It's charged, filled with understanding, with pattern recognition, with context, with calm, which is what makes it terrifying, because when you eventually speak, if you ever choose to, it won't sound reactive, it won't sound confused, it won't sound emotional, it will sound precise, and precision dismantles narratives brick by brick. They thought they buried your voice. What they actually did was preserve it, untouched by panic, uncorrupted by haste, sharpened by time. And now, without you saying a single word, the questions they tried to outlaw are beginning to ask themselves, quietly, naturally, inevitably, because truth does not need permission, it only needs time. They didn't forbid curiosity. They trained people to fear it. That's how narrative control works. You don't outlaw questions. You make questions feel unsafe. You don't censor truth. You make truth socially expensive. And systems like that only survive while pressure is constantly applied. The moment vigilance slips, the moment exhaustion sets in, the moment they believe the danger has passed, that's when fractures appear. Because maintaining a false reality requires energy, attention, performance, control. And control always leaks. The moment someone relaxes, the moment someone trusts the wrong person, the moment someone asks the wrong question, everything starts to wobble. You weren't the villain by accident. You were the villain by necessity. They couldn't survive with the truth intact, so they rewrote the story. They couldn't face what they did. They couldn't tolerate the image of themselves without distortion. They couldn't sit with accountability. So they did the only thing cowards do. They created an antagonist, not because you were dangerous, but because the truth you carried was. They labeled you emotional, dramatic, bitter, not carelessly, precisely. Each word chosen for a reason. Emotional, so your clarity could be dismissed as instability. Dramatic, so your pain could be reframed as exaggeration. Bitter, so your boundaries could be painted as resentment. Those weren't insults. They were shields. Insurance policies against the future, so that if you ever spoke, the verdict would already be decided, your credibility would already be damaged, and that reveals something critical. You weren't the first. People don't perfect these tactics on their first attempt. They refine them, sharpen them, learn which words land, which stories stick, which narratives survive scrutiny. Which means before you, there were others. Others silenced. Others discredited. Others erased quietly. You're just the first who saw the pattern. And their guilt, it has nothing to do with remorse. They're not replaying your pain. They're not mourning what they destroyed. They're not wishing they had done better. They're haunted by exposure, by the possibility that someone might finally see through the mask. Their guilt is not moral. It's defensive. It's the fear of being unmasked. What eats at them in the quiet isn't empathy, it's vulnerability. The knowledge that their image is fragile, that their reputation rests on a story that can't survive examination. That one honest conversation could undo years of construction. Watch how they behave now. The compulsive explaining, the preemptive justifying, the strange need to remind people who they are before anyone questions it. That's not healing, that's surveillance of their own narrative. Because when someone builds their identity on distortion, every interaction becomes a risk. Every memory becomes a liability. Every person who knew both of you becomes a potential witness. And that's the prison they live in now. Not one you built, one they designed themselves. You walked out. They stayed behind, maintaining walls that get heavier every day. Because lies age badly. And truth, even when silent, never stops moving toward the surface. They're haunted by what their behavior revealed about who they truly are. Not the version they show the world. Not the curated identity they protect so carefully. But the unfiltered self that surfaced when no one was supposed to be watching. What eats them alive isn't remorse, it's exposure. They're not replaying your pain in their mind. They're replaying the moment they realized what their actions said about them. Watch them when your name comes up. The sudden tightening in the jaw, the story that arrives too quickly, as if rehearsed, the explanations that begin before anyone even finishes the question, the defensiveness that feels disproportionate, the urgency to clarify details no one challenged. That's not healing. That's damage control. That's someone guarding a narrative that no longer feels stable. Because cover stories are fragile. They depend on consistency, on memory, on never being contradicted, and cover stories always leak. In the eyes that won't quite meet yours when the past is mentioned, in the tension that creeps into their shoulders, in the laugh that comes half a second too late, in the way they suddenly change subjects just a little too fast, in the exaggerated performance of being fine, because pretending requires energy, and energy eventually runs out. They resent you now, not because you harmed them, but because you exist as living evidence of who they became when integrity was optional. In their mind, if you had vanished quietly, if you had erased yourself completely, they could finally forget the version of themselves they don't want to face. Your existence keeps the mirrors standing, so they blame you for their guilt, for their discomfort, for the weight they carry. In their twisted logic, if you are the problem, then they don't have to be. This is what happens when someone chooses image over integrity, when reputation matters more than conscience, when appearing good becomes more important than being honest. Guilt doesn't soften them, it hardens them. It doesn't inspire accountability. It breeds hostility toward the reminder, toward the witness, toward the one person who knows the truth without distortion. So they double down on the lies, not because they believe them, but because retreat now would destroy everything they've built, because admitting the truth wouldn't just expose what they did, it would expose how long they've been pretending, how many people they misled, how carefully they curated their innocence, how much of their identity is performance. And that's a collapse they are not prepared to survive. They never wanted you healed. They wanted you dependent. They wanted you small enough to need them, grateful enough to praise them, broken enough to make them look strong. As long as you were fractured, they were the savior. As long as you doubted yourself, they were the authority. As long as you stayed wounded, they stayed elevated. But the moment you reclaimed yourself, everything destabilized, because healed people can't be controlled. Healed people can't be framed. Healed people don't fit inside false narratives. Your clarity shattered the hierarchy. Your independence ended the illusion. And that's the truth they can never forgive you for. Not that you left, that you healed. Because your healing proved something they never wanted revealed. They were never the hero. They were the beneficiary of your suffering, and now they have to live with that knowledge. Every single day, your healing exposed something they never wanted revealed. They were never helping. They were feeding. Public compassion, private extraction, support on the surface, control underneath. Every kindness came with a hidden contract. Every gesture carried an unspoken expectation. Every "I'm here for you" quietly meant, stay where I can reach you. They didn't want you strong. They wanted you dependent. Because dependence is leverage. When you finally step back to protect yourself, they didn't recognize courage. They called it betrayal. Because boundaries are intolerable to people who survive on access. The moment you drew a line, you shattered the arrangement they never admitted existed. And that's when panic set in. Not grief, not loss. Control withdrawal. They weren't afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing influence, so they reached for the only thing still within their grasp, your silence. They spoke for you. They assigned you motives you never had. They narrated your pain in ways that served them. They rewrote your absence as abandonment, ingratitude, instability. Because as long as they owned your narrative, they could still shape how everyone understood the past. They could still be the hero, still be the wounded one, still be the reasonable one who tried, and silence, to them, looked like permission. But silence has its own power, because silence creates space, and space invites attention. People started sensing the imbalance. Why does this story only move in one direction? Why does this person seem so invested in controlling how someone else is remembered? Why does absence require so much explanation? Silence does something dangerous. It removes friction. And when friction disappears, patterns become visible. The repetition, the defensiveness, the emotional framing designed to preempt doubt. They thought by filling the void, they were protecting themselves. What they were actually doing was revealing themselves. Because people can feel when a story is being managed. They hear it in the tone. They see it in the urgency. They notice how every detail bends towards self-justification. And slowly, without you saying a word, a question forms. Why does this need so much control? Why does this version need to be maintained so carefully? Why does the person who is absent still seem to dominate every explanation? That's when silence becomes dangerous, because silence lets time work. It lets contradictions accumulate. It lets behavior speak. It lets others have their own experiences that echo yours. And your story, the one they thought they buried, begins to grow without your help. Not as accusation, as recognition. Because silence doesn't erase truth. It distills it. And what they didn't anticipate is this. By speaking for you, they made your eventual voice more powerful. By rewriting you, they sharpened the contrast. By controlling the narrative, they exposed how afraid they were of the version they couldn't control. And now they live with a permanent uncertainty. They don't know what you remember, what you noticed, what you understood after distance gave you clarity. They don't know when your silence became insight. And that not knowing is their punishment. Because stories built on access collapse the moment access ends. And the moment you left, everything they built on you began to decay. It creates space, and space invites curiosity. And curiosity is lethal to false narratives. Your untold story became a presence, not visible, not spoken, but felt. In every conversation that seemed slightly incomplete. In every explanation that sounded just a little too polished. In every retelling that needed just a bit too much defending. Every time they spoke for you, people sensed it. The artificiality. The convenience. The way the story always bent in their favor, because real voices carry weight. They carry texture, memory, contradiction, emotion that doesn't perform. And performances, no matter how refined, always sound hollow next to lived experience. That's why they fear your voice, not because it will be loud, not because it will be dramatic, but because it will be different. And difference is devastating. One honest tone is enough to dismantle an entire construction. They didn't destroy you because you were too much. They destroyed you because you were too real. Your depth unsettled them. Your questions threatened them. Your honesty destabilized the mask they depended on to survive. You saw too clearly, so they struck first. Preemptive erasure. Not out of anger, out of fear, because people only try to erase what can expose them. You weren't a punishment. You were the test, a moment of choice, an invitation to grow, and they failed it. They thrived in shallow waters, comfortable in performances, safe in ambiguity. Then you arrived with oceans. Truth, presence, depth. They didn't drown because you were deep. They drowned because they never learned to swim in reality. Your story didn't die. It went underground. And underground things don't decay. They root, they spread, they build pressure. Because truth doesn't vanish. It waits. And what terrifies them most now isn't what you might say. It's what you already know. They don't know what you remember. What details you kept. What patterns you recognized. What connections you made after the fog lifted. They don't know when your clarity arrived. Or how complete it is. Your silence gave time for something far more dangerous than anger. Understanding. Time for patterns to emerge. For other people to recognize themselves in your experience. For your story to become larger than a single relationship, a single conflict, a single moment. Now your voice is no longer reaction. It's context. It's coherence. It's the missing framework that suddenly makes everything else make sense. And when that framework drops into place, the victim narrative collapses into manipulation. The healing journey reveals itself as performance. The growth story becomes escape from accountability. And you don't need public redemption. You already have something far rarer. Clarity. The kind that doesn't require witnesses. The kind that doesn't depend on validation. the kind that anchors you permanently in your own truth. That is the final form of power. They're still performing, still monitoring perception, still hiding from mirrors, still afraid of a question they can't control. You're free, living contradiction to everything they said, living proof the narrative was false, and one day, quietly, inevitably, someone will ask the question they were trained not to ask. And when they do, everything shifts, not because your story is dramatic, because it's accurate. And accuracy has gravity. It pulls reality back into alignment, whether anyone wants it to or not. You didn't vanish. You outlasted. The story was always yours. They were only temporary characters who confused themselves with the author. Now guilt is doing its work. Lies are thinning. Structures are weakening, and justice is moving, not loudly, not theatrically, but with the precision of consequence. You don't need to fight. You don't need to prove. Stand in your truth. The universe is already finishing what they started. And here's the ending they never planned for. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to chase justice. You don't have to prove anything, because time is already doing the work. Truth has a gravity of its own. It pulls masks off. It collapses performances. It brings hidden things back into the light, slowly, quietly, inevitably. They're still trying to manage perception, still rewriting history, still watching shadows, wondering when the past will catch up. But you're no longer in the game. You're no longer reacting, no longer explaining, no longer carrying what was never yours to hold. You left the battlefield and claimed your life. And that is the part no manipulation can survive. Because narratives only work on people who still need permission. You don't. Your peace is the verdict. Your clarity is the sentence. Your freedom is the outcome. Let them perform. Let them defend. Let them maintain the illusion. You're already living beyond it. And when the truth finally surfaces, not through drama, not through revenge, but through quiet recognition, it won't feel like victory. It will feel like confirmation that you were never broken, never wrong, never the villain, just early, just honest, just brave enough to leave. And that is how stories really end. If this resonated, you already know why you're here. Please subscribe to this channel for more.